Namaskar, good evening, and Johar. Welcome to the very first episode of The Last Mile. I must confess something honestly before I begin. For several months, I kept asking myself a simple question: why should anyone listen to me? The world today is overflowing with podcasts. Everybody seems to have a microphone, an opinion, a platform, and a point of view. Every day, there are conversations on development, policy, politics, economics, climate change, social justice, philanthropy, governance, almost everything under the sun. So, why another podcast? And more importantly, why me? I'm not a celebrity, I'm not a television face, I'm not a famous economist, politician, or best selling author. I'm simply someone who has spent more than 35 years traveling across India, listening to people whose stories rarely make it to the national conversations. Over these years, my journey has taken me through dense forests, mining belts, floodplains, drought hit villages, conflict prone habitations, remote tribal settlements, crowded slums, relief camps after disasters, and forgotten geographies that often appear on maps during elections, epidemics, or tragedies. I have sat with Santhal women in villages of Jharkhand as they spoke about forests disappearing before their eyes. I have listened to the farmers in Bihar discussing floods as if they were an annual season of fate. I have seen children in remote habitations walk miles for schooling that many urban Indians take for granted. I have watched communities rebuild life after earthquakes, cyclones, floods, and displacement. And somewhere during these journeys, I realized something deeply unsettling. India speaks a great deal about the poor, the tribal communities, the vulnerable, the excluded, but not enough with them. Policies are discussed in conference halls, reports are launched in hotels, data is debated in seminars, yet the distance between those conversations and the lived reality of people at the margins often remains painfully large. That distance is what I call the last mile. And perhaps that is why this podcast was born. Not to deliver lectures, not to claim expertise over others, not to create noise, but to create conversations that still smell of the soil. Conversations rooted in lived experiences, in failures and lessons, in filled realities, in hope, and sometimes in discomfort. Because the truth is, development is not a spreadsheet. It is not merely funding, policy notes, indicators, dashboards, or CSR reports. Development is deeply human. It is emotional. It is political. It is unequal. It is messy, and often it is invisible. Over the years, I have had the privilege of working with grassroots organizations, international NGOs, major consulting firms, philanthropic foundations, governments, and the World Bank. I have seen the sector from both ends, from villages without roads to boardrooms discussing billion-dollar investments. But if there is one thing life has taught me, it is this: wisdom does not always sit in institutions. Sometimes it sits quietly in communities. This podcast is my attempt to bring those worlds closer. As the last mile moves ahead, I hope to bring into these conversations people whom India does not hear enough from: community leaders, field workers, researchers, district officials, social entrepreneurs, tribal youth, women leaders, donors, philanthropists, policy thinkers, and people quietly changing realities without headlines or television debates. Some episodes may speak about health, nutrition, livelihood, education, migration, climate change, tribal development, or technology. Some may focus on policy. Others may simply tell stories that deserve to be heard. We may not always agree with one another. We may not always have easy answers, but we will try to remain honest, human, and grounded. And perhaps that is what is missing most in public conversations today. Before I conclude, let me make one small promise. For every episode ahead, we will announce the topic at least 10 days in advance. We want listeners to engage, respond, challenge, suggest questions, and even recommend voices that deserve to be heard. Because the last mile is not meant to become my platform only. I hope it slowly becomes a shared space for people who still believe that meaningful change begins by listening carefully to those standing furthest away from power. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And if in some small way these conversations help bridge the distance between policy and people, between privilege and exclusion, between comfort and reality, this effort would have been worthwhile. Until next time, stay thoughtful, stay compassionate, and never forget the people living at the last mile. Namaskar.